Thank you for attending the next Smith.ai Master Series here today. The Smith.ai Master Series is a bi-weekly webinar series that Smith.ai hosts with thought leaders and business leaders across the legal community and those that deal with small business owners. And we try to give tips and tricks and really education lessons on how folks out there can run more efficient and more profitable law firms and small businesses. So today we have the pleasure of Krystal Champlin joining us here today from RJH Consulting. And I'm going to turn it over to her, let her do an introduction of herself and her consulting firm. And then we'll get into the discussion today where we're talking about law firm business growth and how you can grow your law firm, scale your law firm, and hopefully make it a much more profitable practice. So Krystal, a little intro, and then we'll jump into things.
Thank you, Tom. As Tom said, my name is Krystal Champlin, and I am the owner and CEO of RJH Consulting. RJH is a boutique consulting firm that works with small, solo, and mid-sized law firms, helping them create sustainable growth, whatever that may mean for them. So we work on, because we are boutique, we do not have cookie cutter processes in place, but we do try to implement the best practices and implement what it is that you're trying to get to, or that level of growth that you're get to, and help you create that sustainable success. We have 9 consultants on our team, and we are very hands-on with all of our clients. The other thing, we are hosting a solo and small firm mastermind group coming up here shortly that the law firm owners will be able to log in and learn just some of the different best practices and fundamentals of running a law firm without the consulting piece of it.
Awesome. So those that are attending here today, if you have any questions, you can use either the chat function or the Q&A function. I'm going to be looking at those throughout this discussion, and I will feed them and relay them to Krystal so that way she can help answer any questions that you might have. This will be about a 45-minute discussion. If you don't have any questions throughout, I will reserve a few minutes towards the end for you to ask a question, and we'll get it answered for you live here during the webinar. So this is a really cool discussion here today because we've had a few that kind of teed itself up for this discussion. We had one a few weeks ago that was specifically on setting goals for law firm owners and making sure that you have a nice concrete plan. We did one a few weeks ago with the CEO of Lawmatics, and that was specifically on how you can reduce your administrative time and free up your time for actually more billable work. And I did a discussion at the Missouri Bar's Solo and Small show just a few days ago, specifically on technology that law firm owners should be considering in order to spend more time on billable work. So all of those discussions kind of lead up to this one, I think, which is specifically on how to grow your law firm better. So Krystal, let's begin with, why would a typical lawyer or law firm owner, specifically those that own a solo or small practice, what's the main motivations for them wanting to grow a firm? What do they usually come to you for as to what is their goal for wanting to scale and grow?
Well, they want to get to that next level of success. And so they're seeing their colleagues out there that have a bigger practice, making more money, maybe handling the type of cases that they want to handle. And then also what they're seeing out there is, the baby boomers are retiring. So there's an opportunity to really get in network, or either acquire their practice or network to be able to get some of those referral cases out there. And so when that is organically happening, as a human and a business owner, you start thinking, okay, well, what is that next level of growth for me? How do I scale that? And how do I make this happen? And I think sometimes, when we get into that mind frame, we get so excited that, hey, these are the possibilities, but we're not really sure what those possibilities are. And so that's when, coming in, I know that you guys focused on growth plans and goal setting before, but really getting a strategic plan in place to have a vision of what that may look like for you and what the possibilities are.
So once they get to a point where they know they want to grow, they know they want to scale it, whether it is to get it to a point where they can sell it or whether it should just be more profitable,
Right.
staff, so that way they can have better work-life balance and reduce the amount of time that they have to invest in the firm, whatever the goal may be. What's like the framework that you kind of walk them through at the very early stages of you beginning to work with a new client as to what that plan actually looks like?
It's really a vision plan, right? It's what does the next 3 years look like for you? And I say in 3 years because the legal landscape changes so much that if you do anything outside of 3 years, it's your plan's going to change and you're going to have to pivot. And also with the economy as well. So when we do that strategic planning session, it's really answering questions on, what is a win for you? What and why does that matter? I think the why part is so important to really understand because a lot of times we see that next shiny object out there and we say, oh, we need this part, or we need to be doing this, or we need to be doing that, when in reality, that's not part of our plan at all. So really dialing down onto what does that vision look like? Why are we doing this? And then creating a plan to be able to get to that result. I like to break it down into 1 year goals and then 90-day bite-sized pieces. That way it is attainable and you do see some traction going forward.
And what are some of the core components of that plan? You obviously have goals, you have what your strategy might look like. There's obviously financial components and measurement components. You have kind of like pillars of what the areas of the plan look like.
Yeah, absolutely. So we look at your revenue. What do you want your revenue to be in 3 years? And is that attainable? If you're going from 2 million to 10 million, how do we get there, right? And is that realistic? Then we look at the marketing piece of it. Where are you getting your cases from now? What do you need to do for business development, networking, marketing sources, advertising, whatever it is that may need to be done. Maybe it's a rebuild of the website, maybe it's PPC, maybe it's getting more visible on social, whatever that is, that's a piece to it as well. And then we look at the people aspect of it, right? Do you have the right people in the right seat? Because that makes all the difference in the world. And we use a lot of the EOS system, do you get it? Does that specific person get it? Do they want it? And do they have the capability of doing that role? And if they don't, is there a place in the firm that they can sit at? Or do we just need to simply move them out? So when we're looking at a strategic plan, we're looking at 4 parts. We're looking at what is the actual plan for the firm? What is the people part of it? How many people do we need, or how many people will we need in 3 years for the different positions? What is the processes that we have in place, or the infrastructure? Like, do we have a case management system or a practice management system? Do we have a billing aspect to it? Do we have that marketing piece and that intake piece to be able to track? And then, what are our profits? Are we healthy there? Are we making the revenue that we need to make to bring in a healthy net profit?
Okay, we'll probably dig into each one of those as we
Okay.
go throughout this conversation, right? 'Cause that's the bread and butter of this. But let's back up real quick. And what would you say is something that a lot of your clients are doing wrong before they come to you? What are they being challenged with as to why they can't scale or grow without support? Where are they coming up short in most cases?
Okay, so they're coming up short in looking at their financials. You should be looking at your profit and loss statement every month. You should have a balance in looking at your budget to actual every month. And so when we're looking at that, we're creating, what are the ratios that you're spending on the big 3, which I call advertising and marketing, non-attorney compensation, and attorney compensation. And then that other category is usually the death by 1,000 cuts, right? That's all of your office expenses, that's your consultants, that's all these other things that you go to. And then what is your net profit? And if any of those ratios are out of whack, then we drill down and say, okay, what do we need to do in this category to either get this back in play or bring in more revenue?
Okay, and where, if they are happening to be tracking those financial details, hopefully most, if not all,
Most are not.
most are not. Okay, so that's the biggest problem, right? The lack of knowing where the dollars are coming and going, right? That's going to be your first problem. If they are tracking it, where do they tend to be overspending, where you need to try and work through a new approach for them to save on overhead costs and spend more on the areas that come back in the form of billable work?
Sure. It's usually attorney compensation and non-attorney compensation. A lot of firms out there, because we do have this big work-life balance going on, the billable hour requirements are low for some firms, especially for a solo and small firm. They want to try to retain their employees. but their employees aren't necessarily billing like they should be, or they're not collecting like they should be. So when we look at that, we have to put some parameters around that, and even bonus incentives and whatever it is that's going to work for that particular culture of the firm to be able to get them to level up on that revenue and increase that net profit.
There's a lot of businesses out there that work on a
Yes,
great model, right? We're obviously talking about law firms here, but a lot of businesses fit into that same
correct.
model that have to operate in the same type of way. I worked on the marketing agency side for over a decade, and this was our, day-to-day life where we were just figuring out how much was going towards billable client work and how much was going towards admin and overhead. And for every employee you have that's not contributing towards the billable work, we had office manager, we had people on the sales side that were looking to, do business development. All of those need to be factored into the model, where your billable employees, those of us that were performing the marketing work, needs to go that much more beyond what would be, an expected capacity to make up the difference and get your hourly, your yield
Right.
at a healthy rate. And I think law firm owners that are actually the business manager, they need to keep that in mind, that there's staff that aren't performing billable work, and that it needs to be made up. Those that are need to make up the difference, right?
Right, right. So we call those profit center analysis. Everybody that works for you needs to be a profit center, right? And so your intake people, your receptionist, all of the other people in your firm that it takes to run, that's not necessarily billing hours out, or allocate a certain portion to each profit center. And so that's how you're getting, because they have to cover some of the overhead, right? And then you look at what that net profit is for that particular profit center and determine whether that makes sense or not. And if it doesn't, then you make some adjustments on, hey, what is it that we need to do to either make this person profitable, give them more cases, raise their billable hours, lower their billable hours, whatever it may be.
Right, because it's unrealistic to think that everyone's going to be logging 100
Correct.
hours, even
They're not.
90% of billable work. You just need to figure out what model works for you based on your current staff, hiring, letting go, whatever that case might be, for how you can make those numbers and what your hourly rate should be, right?
Correct, correct.
Right.
And sometimes we recommend, hey, raise the hourly rate because in your geographical area, this is what your competitors are doing. And so for you to attract that ideal client, you need to be charging more. For you to get to your revenue goal, you need to be charging more. So that's sometimes a lot of advice that we give.
And how often is that pricing discussion coming out of your conversations with clients? Is that a common problem where they're not charging enough? When is the last time that they reset their prices? Has it been a long time and they haven't adjusted for what their current staff is, their current overhead looks like, and the market changes and inflation?
Most of no, they're not. They're not accounting for those things. Most of the time I get that question, well, what should it be? Because they don't know what their competitors are charging, or they have a friend that's charging, X amount of dollars, but they're
Okay.
not getting the same type of client, right? And so really focusing in on what is your ideal client, and then what is that ideal client really going to pay, right? And once we figure that out, then we figure out, okay, what is the market going to pay? Let's put in inflation. Let's put in what it's costing you to cover all of your overhead. And this is what you should be charging.
So that brings up a really good point, is making sure that you have the ideal customer that's willing to pay for these services is
The
the
other
lifeblood.
piece to that is that we back the
You're I think your
revenue
connection's a
goal
little
that
weak right
we're
now,
trying to
Krystal. I
get
think you're breaking up.
there. I'll keep going. Okay, what is it?
Maybe
I
turn off
think
your
we're
video so
frozen.
you can hear
Okay.
your audio. Yeah, wait. It's good. It's good. There we go.
Okay.
All right, go ahead.
Okay. Sorry about that, guys. Okay. Where were we at?
So figuring out what that hourly rate should be and how should they go about making those adjustments?
Looking at what it is that you want your annual revenue goal to be. And then you're breaking that down. Okay, if we have X number of attorneys, they have X number of clients, they need to be billing this amount, right? And then also putting in inflation. But if you are accepting clients that aren't your ideal client, they're never going to pay. And so you're going to have a huge collectible balance out there, and that's what we're trying to avoid. So it's really a balance of, what is our billable rate? What can we actually collect when, or historically collect on, and then what is the goal of trying to get to your annual revenue?
So obviously finding the right audience is crucial, because it's going to maximize your investments in marketing and advertising. It's going to maximize your productivity in taking meetings and consultations and working through that quote unquote sales process. And obviously it results in more fruitful work and more
Right.
satisfied clients and referral business. So dealing with the right people is so important. How do you in your work with clients go about building that ideal customer profile?
Referrals, correct.
You're breaking up again. I didn't hear what you said.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah, try it
I
on
know
the video.
you
Maybe,
are freezing, so I'm not quite sure what's going on here. Could you repeat your question? You were frozen on my end.
how do you go about building the ideal customer profile for your customers? How do they know who the best fit clients are?
So it depends on what their practice area is. So for an estate planning attorney, right? And I'll just take that as an example. If you are doing wills at $1,000, if you're doing simple successions, that type of thing, that's probably not going to get you to your revenue goal unless you just want to churn and burn every day, right? But if you really want to do some meaningful work, then what is that estate planning? What does that estate look like, right? Is that the more affluent clients? Is that a certain demographic? And then you start breaking that down to marketing and networking to those people. Estate planning, financial planners are great for referrals and networking. And I think getting out there in your book of business and determining, who is it that I know that may know somebody that I need to know as well, and then asking for those referrals, right? Another example would be maybe a PI firm that gets a lot of workers' comp calls, but they don't handle workers' comp cases. So creating a relationship with another workers' comp attorney, where if your state allows you to get a referral fee from that, that would be another revenue stream. So trying to be creative on what are those additional revenue streams for you that you can create instead of just your bread and butter practice areas.
So let's dig into kind of those two of those pillars, the people and the processes, because I think that those are really the the nuts and bolts of what ends up
Mhm.
coming out of your plan, right? These are the things where they actually make changes and start making a difference. So I had these stats that I presented in the Missouri Bar's presentation of a typical workday of your typical lawyer. Only 2.5 hours is billable work. The other hours are business development, 2 hours, 3 hours spent on administrative tasks, and 2 hours lost from so many interruptions and distractions. So only 2.5 hours is billable work on any given day. There's so much loss baked into all of this minutia or mishandling of work, or miscommunication across your team. Like all of these things kind of boil together, results in just like kind of a really unproductive workday, I think, for lawyers. So let's get into the people and the processes, because this is what we unpack this
Right.
wasted time with, right? So let's talk people first. How do you go about understanding what their current staff and their outsourced staff looks like, measuring it to see if it's the infrastructure that it should or shouldn't be, and then helping coach them on making changes to their staff and their people?
Sure. So we start with that profit center analysis, right? And then we look at who are all the people that you have in place that, do you really need those people? Do you need 4 intake specialists? And does the data support that, right? Do you need 4 receptionists, or do you need to outsource that because it's more cost effective? The other part is we ask the question, if you were to start a new law firm tomorrow, would you enthusiastically rehire everyone on your team? And if that answer is not yes, then we really take a look at the a metrics of, where does that person really fit in the organization? Are they doing their job? Do they have the capability of doing it? Do they want it, or are they just kind of there because they're a sacred cow, or they've been there for a long time, or it's a older receptionist that we don't want to let go, that type of thing. So we start looking at all of those culture things and the intricacies that just go with running people management, right?
Right.
And then we start setting expectations for those people, and either they meet them or they don't. And it's not to have those people fail, but it's really trying to help them level up, because us as business owners, if we're not giving them the training and the tools for them to succeed, then we're failing them. And so we teach them how to do that, and then we evaluate that employee or that team member and determine, do they have a place in this firm?
What's a typical firm size that you deal with, and how many employees do they tend to employ, and what are the job titles of those people?
Okay.
Maybe leave your video off. It might be taking up a lot of bandwidth on your end.
I'm going to do that if that's okay with you guys.
Yeah, I think that'll work out better. I can hear you good. Can you hear me, Krystal?
Yes, I can hear you now.
So the latest question was, what of the clients that you typically deal with, how large are those firms in terms of the number of employees, and what type of roles do they tend to play?
And we deal with solo, small firm, and mid-sized firms. I don't deal with firms over 100, 125 employees, because once you get there, you have usually a board of directors or a leadership team. And so there's different layers of that management. And it's harder to make changes within the firm than it is when you're dealing with a much smaller firm. And sometimes when the larger firms or the mid-sized firms, their vision is always different across the board. So there's not one vision. The owner's vision is usually different from the executive committee or the leadership team.
So if there's a law firm owner that might be acting as a solo right now, or small, and they want to scale, that's what we're talking about here today, right? What are some of the employees that they need to be thinking about hiring? We'll get into outsourcing in a second, but who which positions make the most sense to bring in-house?
The positions that make the most sense to bring in-house is, I think, a paralegal. If you are client facing, you need your paralegal there. I do recommend that people hire certified paralegals. I'm not against legal assistants, or those that have had industry practice. And sometimes, if they've had years of industry practice, then that would offset the paralegal certificate. But I do think that it brings in you're able to make higher expectations with those that have some type of degree. The other thing is, I think you need to have a receptionist and an intake person, or a program outsourced, whether it is whatever program out there that you can outsource to get those intakes taken care of at all times during the day, after hours, or whatever. I think when you get to a certain cases and a certain point of revenue is when you need to look into taking on another attorney. And it's usually a very green attorney that you can train to do things your way, right? And train them to be able to take on those cases that you don't want to handle. And that goes into, ranking those cases. I think especially solo law firm owners, if they're looking to hire another attorney, then they need to be working on the VIP cases, while that other or that green, the run cases.
If they're looking to bring on an attorney,
Mhm.
where are the best resources to find them? Do they go immediately to law school grads and someone that's as green as can be, or are there other resources that you tend to recommend for them to bring on another attorney?
I think you need to go to the bar associations and start networking and asking. A lot of times, these bar associations have a collection of resumes that attorneys are looking for. Um, Ask other people within your network who is out there that's looking for a job that would be really great, that needs to be on my team, that type of thing. And I think putting ads out there on Indeed or ZipRecruiter or whatever is great, but you have to cycle through
Right.
300 resumes to get one that's really, really good. So really putting the word of mouth out there and using the organizations that are specific to your practice area, I think is the best way to do that.
That's good advice. Okay, awesome. All right, so that's on the in-house side, like bringing employees into your team. How about on the outsource side? We talked about virtual receptionists. That's what Smith.ai does. That's why we host these webinars, right? Because we know how important that is. Are there any other roles outside of outsourcing your receptionists that you recommend? That
Yes,
better?
so your intake team, depending on what practice area you're in, any type of back office work, bookkeeping, those types of things can be outsourced. If you are in medical records, that can be outsourced. I think using technology such as virtual depots. There's companies out there now that can do that for you as well. Steno is one of those companies. Scribe is another company.
Yeah.
Anything like that that you can outsource to companies that have a specialized team is probably better. But again, if you are client facing, then you do need to have an in-house team to be able to maintain that culture and that rapport with the clients.
Yeah, it's really striking that balance, right? You can't
Correct.
scale indefinitely and still act as a solo, right? There needs to be more folks on the team. It can't 100% be outsourced. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay. So that's on the people side. Now let's get into the process side. What processes do you find small law firms currently have in place, and where they may be broken and need fixing? What are they coming to the table in the conversation with that where they don't have the right processes in place?
So most of the time they tell me that, hey, yes, I do have processes in place, but I don't know what they are, right? I don't know. We have a list of things. I really don't know what they do, but I know that we have a handbook or we have a manual on how to do this. I find, well, the number one area that we go to look at to begin with is intake, because intake is both sales and marketing, right? And then we look at the financial piece of it. What does that look like? And then we start breaking it down. Okay, what is that client experience journey from intake to resolution? And during each piece of that, what are the SOPs or what are the best practices that need to be put in place in order to make sure that you are servicing that client and that we are adhering to whatever bar rules are for that particular practice area? The other thing I find that solo and small firms lack is a training process, right? They throw somebody in and they expect them to know everything. Well, every firm does things differently. You may use the same practice management system as a different firm, but that practice management system is going to be used a little bit differently. So really having a robust training program for the first 1 or 2 weeks, depending on that new hire's experience, is key to it. And then I also recommend having refresher courses throughout the year for your current team members to make sure that we're all on the same page and we're doing things the same way. What I found is that we have a lot of subject matter experts on our teams that we're not utilizing to share their knowledge with everybody else. But in reality, when we share knowledge and we roundtable cases and roundtable issues that are going on at the firm or on processes, then we all level up and we all tend to do things the same way. And so your reporting comes out a little bit cleaner.
Let's go back to intake for a second. Obviously, super important for a number of different reasons, from productivity to making sure that the right fit clients get through. How do they know the right type of questions to be asking? How do they know how to build that intake form and making sure that it's going to do its job?
When we take a look at that, so we take a look at, what are the questions that you're asking and what are the qualifiers? So if it is a case that you want to accept, what questions need to be asked, and then how do they need to be answered in order to qualify that case, right? And it's part of the sales process as well. How are we getting that retainer in the door? Are we doing DocuSign? Are we scheduling an in-person consultation? What does that process look like, and where is the gap where you're dropping clients off? Because a lot of times I will see that, we get all these leads in, we have these calls with clients, they want to sign, but if you schedule an in-person consultation or you delay getting that retainer and the onboarding packet to them, then they're dropping off. So there's really two layers to that intake process, and you want to find out where it is in that process where the gaps are and close that gap.
So this segues nicely into kind of technology and integration of technology. I say this stat, I think, on every webinar, but it's really important, and it goes with so many things in the topics that we talk about. But speed matters, and the
Correct.
faster you can get back to those trying to do business with you, the faster you can get back to those requesting information from you, the more likely you are to bring on clients. The stat is you can increase your conversion rate by 400% if you respond immediately to those that are
Mhm.
trying to bring you on as an attorney, right? But a lot of folks don't have the infrastructure set up through the use or misuse of technology, namely to actually act that fast. Is that right?
Correct. The rule of thumb is to get back to them within 1 or 2 minutes. Ideally, you want to take in those live calls, or outsource that to an answering service that can take those calls and then warm transfer those over. But if you're not getting back to your leads within 1 or 2 minutes, most likely you've lost that lead.
Exactly. So let's talk now about like what technology do you recommend to your clients to help not only respond that quickly and get the information logged that quickly, but kind of beyond that, what's the tech stack look like that you're recommending that they immediately need to start adopting to start being in a growth mindset?
So if you, and I'll tell you this, if you are a solo or small firm attorney that gives out your cell phone, stop doing that. Route those calls over to a call center that can answer those on nights and weekends for you. Get somebody, I cannot tell you how many attorneys give out their cell phone number and they're missing calls and leads because of that. So make sure that you have that covered for you. The other thing is if you don't have enough people on your team to be able to answer calls during the day, then make sure that you're outsourcing that as well. I think that's the number one thing that I see solo and small firms losing revenue, and intake is revenue. They're losing it right there because they're not able to get to the calls. And I'll be completely transparent, when a paralegal is overwhelmed with too many cases, they're not taking that new call because they don't want that case,
Right.
right? It's just the mindset of of how it works. So making sure that that is covered, I think is key.
And what type of CRMs or practice management solutions are you recommending, and why? Like, what's the why behind it as to, why you're a big advocate of practice management solutions?
So practice management solutions, I think, if you're working off an Excel or whatever, I think that only gets you so far, right, in the growth mindset and being able to scale your firm. But when you have a practice management system, everything goes in there. The rule of thumb is if it's not in that practice management system, it didn't happen. So whether it's leads that you take or you reject or you don't practice that area, or it's leads that turn into clients, everything needs to go into that practice management system because those are people that you can remarket and retarget to later on. I highly recommend, I like the practice management systems that have all the tools built in. So they have the lead portion of it, they have a billing portion of it, they have the case management portion of it. But of course, there's also other ones out there that you can connect together and make it all work. And then the integrations with answering services like Smith.ai and that type of thing going into your practice management system is key as well.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of trying to find those, those all-in-one type of systems.
Mhm.
You might pay a little bit of a premium, but that's why you're paying a little bit of a premium.
Right.
Do you want to try and, learn 4 different systems, have 4 different points of contact, be onboarded 4 times? Every time a new employee starts, you got to do trainings across 4 platforms, or you just want to do it for one? And that's why they try to bake in a number of different features into the
Correct.
tools, because they know it's beneficial and a lot easier for small businesses to use.
Right. If I tell you that you have to use 4 different programs or you have to put things in 4 different places, it's not going to happen.
Right.
1 out of 10 times is somebody going to actually put the information in there. And again, that goes back to you can't remarket and retarget what you don't have.
Right. Right. So you touched on marketing a little bit. We won't go into too much detail, but obviously they should be running some sort of marketing and advertising, unless they're
Mhm.
operating 100% off word of mouth, which not everyone has that luxury. And by having the right technology, they can measure their marketing performance better. What are you tending to recommend in terms of marketing measurement when it comes to your plans?
So are you asking what stats we should measure?
What stats you should measure
Yeah.
from a marketing standpoint?
Okay, so yes, you should measure the type of leads that are coming in and where they're coming in from each marketing source, right? What happened to that lead? Did it fit your criteria? So did you actually want it? And then did you sign that lead? Did you convert it? And then you want to track, okay, how many of those were no-shows and at what level were they no-shows? And then you want to track how many were rejected, how many did you have to chase to actually get the contract in the door? And then how many of those leads came in that you couldn't make a decision on the phone, that you needed to get some additional information, or you're waiting on an attorney to give you an answer, and how long is that gap to get that answer? I always like my no decisions done at the end of the day. That way that person can get back. Ideally, it's not, if you can avoid sending somebody into a no decision category, that's best. But, the rule of thumb is to try to get that resolved by the end of the day.
How many of your clients are what type of marketing are a lot of your clients doing? Are they still doing a lot of traditional local TV, radio, print? Have they shifted to fully digital ads, and are they working with an agency? What does their marketing efforts look like for a lot of the clients that you take on?
So it depends on what the practice area is again and where you are in the country. But I do have a lot of clients that are moving towards digital marketing, your PPC, your LSA ads. I think LSA ads are becoming more popular every day, and depending on what geographical area you're in, they're very cost effective. Um, I also see a lot of clients getting on social media and having a social media presence, right? I think that's super, super important, because we're all at a red light and we're going through social media and that ad pops up. That's where our phones listen to us, right? And so if you're looking for an attorney, that ad's going to pop up. And just making sure that your Google My Business profile is, everything that your Google and your 3 Stack is really up to date. The other thing that I really still believe in is email newsletters or text messages, giving just, a highlight of the firm or whatever it is that your, new practice areas or a big case that you won. And that goes back to making sure that everything goes into your practice management system so you
Yep.
can retarget and remarket, because you never know who's going to need you. A lot of my clients do still get most of their cases from referrals from other attorneys, and it's creating that relationship. It's that reactivation network. It's that question, who do you know that I need to know to be able to grow my business?
So we talked about what marketing they can or should be doing. We talked about the marketing metrics that they should be tracking, but how do they track it? Do they need to be asking, how did you hear about us, in their intake forms? Do they need call tracking and other forms of marketing software installed on their sites? What's the best way to gather that marketing data so they can help justify how they're spending money and where their dollars are going?
Yes, so they do need call tracking software. They do need to ask, how did you hear about us? And that's probably one of the first 3 questions that they ask
Yep.
during an intake call. I'll tell you, not all clients, they'll tell you they heard you on the radio and you haven't been on the radio in years, right? So you have to take it for a grain of salt. Looking at your Google Analytics, looking at how many people are going from your website and how many web forms, if you have that on your website, were filled out, trying to get as granular as possible on what marketing sources are producing viable cases for you. Because if they're not producing viable cases, then you're really wasting money on that marketing source.
That's great. That's great. We're almost done here. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to send them in the chat or in the Q&A, and I can relay them to Krystal here while we're still live. And I can kind of round this out with 1 or 2 final questions if there are no questions from the attendees. So beyond the marketing metrics, obviously we need to be measuring a lot more than just marketing.
Mhm.
What tools should they be using to measure their financials and kind of look at their firm's operations from a holistic level?
So they need to be running their profit and loss statement. They need to be running their budget to actual. They need to run a marketing report to see where their cases are coming from, and what cases produced a fee. And sometimes you can't run that until actually you close the case.
Uh-huh.
So there's a set number of reports that we recommend that clients run every month and then every quarter to be able to pivot on their strategic plan.
Excellent. And obviously the landscape is changing dramatically. Even just the online and the technology that was available even 3-4 years ago is different than it was today, with AI being the biggest driver of change. And things are going to be different in 3 years time from now. How can they keep their pulse on the landscape and the changing market while still staying the course for this growth plan that they created?
I think being open to what the possibilities are. There's so many, like you said, there's so many AIs, there's so many different programs out there. There's always going to be that next shiny object, but what is it that's going to fit for your firm? And the other thing I would say is, the market is constantly changing, and keep looking for opportunities out there that you can either acquire a practice or get referrals from someone that is transitioning out, because succession planning that's one of the number one that we're getting right now. How do I create a succession plan and transition myself out and groom the next generation of leaders, or position my firm to be attractive to sell?
Awesome. Yeah. Okay, last question. It's if there's a law firm owner that's sitting on the line here or watching this playback, and they're kind of on the fence about, do I want to take my firm to the next level? Do I want to grow this thing? Am I happy with where it is now? Do I just kind of, have everything be as is? What's the first step that they should take in order to help decide if they're ready to kind of take that next step and start growing their practice?
Really sit down and take a look at what their next 5 years is, and then they should call me and have a discovery call.
Yeah. Yeah. Seriously.
We
Awesome.
do free discovery calls for anyone who wants to just chat. We're not trying to sell you anything. We're really in the business of servicing others. So if you do have questions like that and you're trying to figure it out, definitely give us a call and we can help you just navigate towards that, and then you can go from there.
I think there's a lot. This isn't just in law, but I think there's a lot of business owners that really try to do it all themselves, and
Mhm.
eventually you get to a point where you admit, hey, I'm good at this, I'm good at this, I'm good at this, I'm not good at these things, and it's important to recognize that, come to that realization, and then tap into partners, strategic partners, and outsource vendors where it doesn't make sense to do it on your own, because not everybody
Correct.
has every skill under the sun. And that's why businesses like you and I exist. So that's
Correct.
Yeah, okay. Krystal, really appreciate the time that you gave to us today to share your insights on law firm growth, especially for small firms. And I thank everyone for being here with us today on this Smith.ai Master Series. We will be live again on future webinars. I think we have one in 2 weeks from now. We actually have two in June, and then we'll be back again in August. And those will be geared specifically towards small and medium-sized businesses and small and medium-sized law firms. So Krystal, thanks again. And thanks everyone for joining us. Take care.
Thank you, Tom. Bye-bye.